The sun was dipping low over the rugged Pacific Northwest, casting its final golden rays through the towering redwoods. The forest seemed alive, a world of its own, shrouded in mystery and timelessness. Deep within its shadows, a lone figure navigated the undergrowth with the caution of someone who had spent his life walking the edges of society. Jack was his name, a drifter hardened by years of survival, his face weathered by time and circumstance. His scruffy appearance spoke of a man who didn't belong anywhere, and yet his sharp, calculating eyes betrayed a relentless determination. Jack wasn't inherently bad. Life had cornered him early on, forcing his hand in ways no child should endure. In a forgotten industrial town where the mills once roared, Jack had grown up surrounded by decay. When the mills closed, hope left with them, and Jack learned quickly that the world wouldn't hand him anything. He had to take it. Theft became his skill, drifting his way across the country, a ghost haunting small towns, stealing what he needed to get by. But this night was different. Jack wasn't looking for scraps to survive. He was chasing something bigger. A cabin in the wilderness. Rumors had reached him in Crescent Ridge, the nearby town. Whispers of an old hermit living deep in the forest, a man said to be guarding relics from the gold rush, maybe even a stash of gold itself. Some called him a recluse, others a mad scholar who had turned his back on the world. Whatever the truth, Jack was convinced the man had something worth taking. As the forest darkened, Jack stumbled into a clearing. There it was, a small, weathered cabin, tucked between the ancient redwoods. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, and the warm light from its single window spilled onto the moss-covered ground. Jack crouched low behind a fallen log, his heart pounding in his chest. Inside the cabin, an old man moved about, his long silver beard catching the flicker of firelight. He wasn't frail, Jack noticed, but his movements were deliberate and slow. This man wasn't just surviving in isolation. He seemed at peace with it. Jack watched for hours, his patience born of necessity. When the cabin's light dimmed and the old man retired to bed, Jack made his move. The forest floor was soft beneath his boots, muffling his steps. The cabin door wasn't locked, a fact that filled Jack with equal parts confidence and unease. Inside the cabin. The interior was sparse but serene. Wooden furniture, shelves lined with books, and a table scattered with papers and maps filled the space. There was no gold, no treasure, just the faint scent of cedar and something Jack couldn't quite name. His eyes landed on a leather-bound journal resting on the table. It called to him, though he wasn't sure why. Flipping through its pages, he found intricate sketches of the forest, constellations, and reflections written in a meticulous hand. One sentence stopped him cold. To find peace, one must confront the chaos within. Jack's first instinct was to scoff, but the words lingered, unsettling him in ways he didn't fully understand. His thoughts were interrupted by a voice that cut through the cabin like a blade. "You won't find what you're looking for in there." Jack spun around, his heart hammering. The old man stood in the doorway, calm and unarmed. His piercing blue eyes seemed to see right through Jack. The hermit's invitation. Jack reached for his knife, but hesitated. There was no threat in the old man's stance, just a strange, disarming presence. "I'm not here to stop you," the man said, his voice steady. "But it seems you're running from something far heavier than me." Jack's lips curled into a sneer. "You don't know anything about me, old man." "You're right," the hermit replied, "but I know enough to see the weight you're carrying. Sit, eat. You've come this far. You might as well hear a story." There was something about the hermit's voice, a mix of authority and kindness that kept Jack from bolting. He sat, though he wasn't sure why. The hermit's story. Over a simple meal of soup and bread, the hermit spoke. He told Jack about a life once filled with ambition and success. A former professor of astronomy, he had lost his wife and child in a car accident years ago. The grief had consumed him, driving him to abandon the world he once knew. "At first, I thought isolation would save me," the hermit said, "but the forest doesn't heal you. It just gives you the quiet to face yourself, and facing yourself is the hardest thing a man can do." Jack listened, despite himself. The hermit's words stirred something inside him, a longing he had buried beneath years of anger and survival. The test. When the meal ended, the hermit handed Jack the leather-bound journal and a pen. "Spend the night here," he said. "Write your story, every regret, every mistake, every dream you've buried. If, by morning, you feel no different, take what you want and leave. I won't stop you." Jack hesitated. This wasn't what he had come for, but something in the hermit's eyes made him agree. Alone in the cabin, he began to write. At first, the words came slowly, but as the night wore on, memories flooded back. His mother's laughter, the shame of his first theft, the lives he had hurt along the way. For the first time in years, Jack allowed himself to feel morning light. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees as Jack sat at the table, the journal now filled with his scrawled handwriting. The hermit entered quietly, his expression unreadable. "Well?" the hermit asked. Jack looked up, tears streaming down his face. "I don't know what to say. It's like I've been carrying this weight my whole life, and I didn't even know it." The hermit nodded. "That's the first step, awareness. Now comes the harder part. What will you do with it?" A new beginning. Jack stayed with the hermit for weeks. He learned to live simply, finding joy in the rustle of leaves and the song of birds. The hermit taught him about the stars, their vastness a reminder of how small his troubles truly were. One night by the fire, Jack asked, "Why did you help me?" The hermit smiled. "Because someone once did the same for me, and because we're all connected, whether we see it or not." The return. When it was time to leave, the hermit handed Jack the journal and a small telescope. "Whenever you feel lost," the hermit said, "look up. The stars will remind you there's more to life than what we see in front of us." Jack returned to Crescent Ridge, a changed man. He found work at a repair shop, using his hands to create instead of take. Slowly, he rebuilt his life, earning the trust of the townspeople and himself. Epilogue. Years later, Jack sat on the porch of his own small cabin, the telescope by his side. A young boy from town approached, curious about the stars. "Come on," Jack said, gesturing to the telescope. "Let me show you something amazing." As they gazed at the night sky, Jack felt a peace he had never known. His story wasn't over. It had simply changed course. Moral: no one is beyond redemption. Sometimes all it takes is a moment of grace and a hand to guide us back to ourselves. The road may be long, but transformation begins with a single step.